Okay, we're just after 12, so I think we'll just get started and folk can continue to join. Welcome everybody today to today's Safe and Together briefing. These are 1 hour briefings that have been designed to just introduce the model. This is a relatively new implementation in Aberdeen City Council, so we received some funding from the Delivering Equally Safe Fund back in May 2022 to implement the Safe and Together model. So we've been doing that in the last kind of 18 months by doing some training. We've got some certified trainers who can deliver the model in-house now to our own staff, but to multi-agency staff as well who are here today. As I've said, today's webinar, everybody's cameras and mics have been turned off. If you wouldn't mind using the chat function to ask any questions, we will have time at the end, hopefully, to go through some of them. And if folk don't mind just introducing themselves via the chat, just letting us know who you are, where you're from, and your job role, just so that we can get an idea of the attendees around the table today. So I'm going to hand over now to Hannah, who's going to start us off, and we will take about 40 minutes to go through this presentation and then do some questions at the end. So over to you, Hannah.
Thanks, Lucy. So good morning, everyone. Yep, my name is Hannah. I'm a multi-agency child protection learning and development coordinator, and I'm one of the 4 currently certified Safe and Together trainers we have in Aberdeen City. I'll quickly ask each of the other trainers to introduce themselves to you and give us a brief description of the work they do supporting families who are experiencing domestic abuse in Aberdeen. So starting with Stacey.
My name's Stacey. I'm a support worker based on the Caledonian Women's Support Work team plus the domestic abuse team in Aberdeen City Council. I predominantly work with survivors of domestic abuse. So through the Caledonian, I only work with women, and through the domestic abuse team, we work with both men and women.
Thanks, Stacey. Kaylee?
Hi, my name's Kaylee McKenna. My background is in children and family social work. I've done that for a long time, including residential parenting assessments. I now work at Justice Services in Spring Garden, and I work predominantly with men who are on the Caledonian programme, so men who've been convicted of a domestic offence. And we work with a three-pronged approach. We work with the men, the women and children in that family, and I'm really excited to be delivering Safe and Together training because I really enjoy this model, and I've seen already in the training how people in Aberdeen are identifying with it.
Thank you. And Lana?
Oh, yeah. Hiya, folks. I'm Lana Blackwood. I'm a social worker based within the Through Care team at Justice Social Work. I've been within Justice Social Work since 2017, I think. So I predominantly work with perpetrators of domestic abuse. I started delivering this training last year, I think it was. And I would agree with Kaylee. I think it's really positive to see how well this is being implemented across the services in Aberdeen. It's really encouraging.
Thank you. So this 1 hour briefing it's been developed by the Safe and Together Institute to help us introduce you to the model, how it works and how it can be adopted to enhance good practice. The model can be used by any agency working with children and families, and it's designed to encourage a cultural and systemic shift, pushing us to consider how we hold perpetrators accountable for their behaviours consistently, regardless of the role we're in or the agency we're from. And it asks us to really reframe our relationship building with the non-offending parent and really think about and consider the language we use when we're working with a non-offending parent or a perpetrator. Before we get started, I'm very aware that I don't know everyone attending this 1 hour briefing today, and so I won't know your professional or indeed personal relationship with domestic abuse. So I just want to give a short reminder to please keep yourself safe during this meeting and to take a minute and step away if anything discussed today is upsetting to you. I also want to highlight that this is an American model. And so the slides talk about, or rather refer to some of the language that we just wouldn't use really in Scotland. Like, for instance, they say domestic violence informed practice, where we'd say domestic abuse. We say domestic abuse in Scotland because it's far more encompassing of all the different kinds of abuse that we know families can suffer, whereas violence is quite it gives the illusion that it's only physical violence. When we say domestic violence, we know that's not the case. So we say domestic abuse. Slide 2, please, Lucy. So our goals in this 1 hour briefing are to really introduce the concept of a perpetrator pattern framework. We want to introduce and understand the Safe and Together model principles and components and how those can be used to guide our practice. We also want to introduce how the Safe and Together model or how to use it in a way that is going to enhance existing good practice, and to share information about the 4-day core training that we also run and the 1-day overview training that we also deliver in Aberdeen City. So there's a few different ways that you can receive information about this really important model. Next slide, please, Lucy. So this is just a very short slide that the Institute chose to add in to their training slide pack for this 1 hour briefing, that just highlights the organisation's overall mission, which is to create, nurture and sustain a global network of domestic abuse informed child welfare professionals, communities and systems. Next slide, please, Lucy. And this is what they really mean by global. This slide shows us all the places that the Safe and Together model is already embedded across the world. Looking specifically at Scotland, Edinburgh City Council were the first to endorse the use of this back in 2014, where they ran an audit which looked at things like quality of a child's plan in making clear what a parent is expected to do about domestic abuse, to improve the outcomes for children and young people. And they did the same thing again 3 years later in 2017 to see how implementing the Safe and Together model and having Safe and Together champions in Edinburgh had an impact on the effectiveness of the support that was available to families experiencing domestic abuse. And the results of that audit are impressive. So Lucy is going to share that link. I think she actually already has. Thank you very much. For you to have a read through that report if you haven't already. It is worth a read and really helps us kind of highlight how important and practically applicable this model is to all of our work. I'm now going to hand it over to Stacey, who's going to take us on to the next slide.
Thanks, Hannah. So Safe and Together have a wide range of resources available on their websites. This usually comes in various forms of small training sessions, which are usually about an hour long to 3 hours, webinars, blogs, podcasts, etc. While most of the resources are universal that's on the website, they do also have specific training which are tailored to various professions such as child welfare, family courts, mental health, substance misuse and women's sector only training. They've also got training available for other multidisciplinary teams. Unfortunately, on their website, most of their training is actually payable, and you'll find that it's paid in dollars, but some of it is at a reasonable cost. Blogs, podcasts, etc. are all free. You can also find some of them on Spotify, which I do highly recommend. As well as doing that, Safe and Together do run some in-person conferences within the UK, and David Mandel, who is the founder of the model, does usually present on a specific topic when he is available. Hopefully, as the UK team begin to expand, more of their conferences will come to like Scotland area. The most they tend to be based within England. Lucy, if you want to move to the next slide. Okay, so the Safe and Together model is centred on delivering a systems change approach. And it's about how we work with families impacted by domestic abuse. It is a long-term approach, and it includes changing the language that we use around working with survivors and perpetrators of domestic abuse. Embedding the model within our practice is ultimately going to lead us to improved and better outcomes for the families that we are working with. And it's shifting the way that we are supporting the families, focusing, I suppose, on family well-being, survivor empowerment, and the appropriate safeguarding of children. As you can see, we're going to do this by improving our cross-system collaboration with the different agencies that we're working with, and having improved competencies around domestic violence universally. I just want to highlight that this model is not a non-removal model. There are going to be times when this remains absolutely necessary. So during the training, practitioners are introduced to the model's principles, which I think Lana will cover in a slide later on within the session. And the practitioners will also learn to recognise and understand the model's 5 critical components to inform their assessments when they're working with families impacted by domestic violence. The critical components, there's 5 of them. They're around identifying the perpetrator's pattern of coercive control, the actions that is being taken by the perpetrator to harm the child. We also want to be looking at identifying the full spectrum of the non-offending parents' efforts to promote the child and family well-being. And we're also going to look at the impact of the perpetrator's behaviour on the child and what role substance misuse, mental health and other socioeconomic factors have within this family. Moving on, the practitioners will also be provided with various practice tools and interventions such as the mapping tools, pivoting and case planning guides. This suite of tools is going to support them in identifying and highlighting survivor strengths and recognising domestic abuse as a parenting choice of the perpetrator. The model also challenges the double standards relating to parenting and gender that we are all well aware of. So it's really about holding fathers to the same high standards and expectations that we hold mothers to. And it shows us how to do that even if our attempts at engaging dad within our assessments are futile. The Safe and Together model is an internationally recognised, and it is proven to do exactly what it says. It is going to support those working with families to enhance their skills in their interviewing, their assessments, their documentation and their case planning when working with families impacted by domestic abuse. Okay, I'm ready to move on to Kaylee, please.
Okay, so this slide really introduces us to what the Safe and Together Institute have to offer us as an organisation and across the multi-agencies when we're looking at implementing this approach. As Stacey's already touched on, Safe and Together will only work in practice if everybody has the same skills, language, and we're all singing from the same hymn sheet, is what we would say in Scotland, isn't it? So across Safe and Together, what we're able to offer in Aberdeen is our core training and our one-day training. During the 4 core day training, we will look at perpetrator mapping tools, which is really keeping fathers accountable for their actions and how that is affecting family functioning. We look at other tools for partnering with the survivor, the mum, and of course we look at how we keep children at the centre of what we're doing. Safe and Together are also looking at a range of research projects, data, e-courses, and of course you have people like us being trained to put Safe and Together out there on the map. Can you move to the next slide, Lucy? This slide is really to highlight where we want to go with our Safe and Together. So similar to being trauma informed in Scotland, we now want to have a workforce who are domestic abuse informed. We want to move from some of the destructive practices that we've had, where we might blame mothers for not being able to control behaviours of fathers, where we might keep perpetrators of domestic abuse invisible within our case planning, and where we look at domestic abuse as an issue for adults and not about how it affects the whole family functioning. Indeed, what we want to do is we want to integrate with other services. We want to make sure that families are receiving the correct services at the correct time. We want to highlight the perpetrator's pattern of behaviour that is affecting the family functioning. So things like whether dad's in control of the finances, or whether he has access to a car and the family live remote and mum's not able to use the car. Like Stacey has already said, holding fathers to a higher standard. So when we're talking to dads, it's asking them all about their children's needs, how they think they might be role modelling for their children, what it is within the family that they're providing to keep the children safe. One of the most recent trainings that myself and Hannah had done when we rounded up at the end, a practitioner told us a story about a family that she was working with where dad works offshore. There had been police call-outs and one of the children had highlighted to someone in school that there was abuse within her home. Now, because dad worked offshore, he was practically invisible within the case planning, and what that led to was the child almost being blamed for bringing that to social work attention. Then we were looking at how the mum was parenting that child and why the child, according to the parents, was making up this story. And it was a really good example of how we'd lost sight of where the concerns actually came from. And I think within the training, it's a really safe space for practitioners to say, sometimes the way that our systems are currently designed doesn't hold fathers to that same high standard as mothers. So she was going to take away some of the things that she'd learned from her 4-day training, and she really wanted to engage dad, and she really wanted to hear how his behaviour was affecting the family functioning, and then how they could support that family. So using this continuum gives us a language to explain why a specific practice or policy has not been benefiting the children or the families that we work with. And alternatively, it's going to suggest to us how best practice and how we can all be domestic abuse informed going forward. That's me finished, Lucy. I think I'll pass over to Lana.
Is my mic on? Yeah, okay. Yes, so Stacey had previously mentioned the safe and together principles. I really like these. These are pretty clear and concise in how we as practitioners should be, I suppose, introducing ourselves into cases where domestic abuse features, and starting to kind of think about how we interview perpetrators, children and survivors, how we undertake these assessments, how this influences our documentation and ultimately our case planning and any interventions used with these families that we're working with. So the first principle clearly states that it's our aim to keep the child safe and together with the non-offending parent, again as the default position. So I suppose it's about identifying who the safe parent is. Hannah, I'm not sure if you'd mentioned at the beginning that, statistically there are, more male perpetrators of domestic abuse, but we don't ignore the fact that our female perpetrators as well. So it's about identifying how we keep the child safe with the non-offending parent. The second principle is partnering with the non-offending parent as a default position. And ultimately, when we are working with survivors, what we know is that they are the best informed and knowledgeable on the perpetrator's pattern of behaviours and the direct impact that it has on the child and the family functioning. They are the ones within the home, they are the ones experiencing it. They will have a better insight into how it impacts on on the child getting to school, on their concentration in school, how it impacts on them being able to get children to any health appointments. The next slide goes further into how it impacts family functioning, but ultimately the survivor will be the best informed on how the perpetrator's behaviour impacts on the child and the family as a whole. So we'd want to take that position as the default position. The third principle is intervening with perpetrators to reduce risk and harm to the child. And again, this goes back to what Hannah was saying. This model is ultimately about holding perpetrators accountable for their behaviour. I think we, across the board of the professions, can appreciate how frustrating it can be to try and engage with perpetrators, whether or not they justify, deny, minimise, or blame their behaviours on others. But it's really essential that we are holding them accountable by at least attempting to have those conversations with them about their behaviour and the impact on their child. Something that the model really highlights is, specifically it should be trained, specialised professionals that undertake any specific interventions, such as the Caledonian programme, to address these types of behaviours. However, that is not to say that we can't be having conversations with them about their behaviour and about child safety. So, are you okay to move on to the next slide? Perfect. The multiple pathways to harm is one of the main assessment tools that is used within the model. It's a really, really holistic approach to capturing the perpetrator's pattern of behaviour and the direct impact and harm that it causes to the child and the overall family functioning. As Stacey had mentioned previously, it takes into consideration any kind of other issues, such as impact on mental health, how substance use comes into play, how perpetrators might cause or exacerbate substance use issues or mental health issues or survivor and children, how their own substance use or mental health issues might increase the risk to the family or to the children. It also takes into consideration the impact their behaviour has on the family ecology, so loss of income, housing instability, loss of contact with extended family, such as grandparents, aunts, uncles, and how it impacts any educational and social disruptions for the child or the family. Hayley, I'm just wondering, have you got anything else that you would maybe add to the multiple pathways to harm? Because I know that when you and I did the overview day recently, I think this is the most fundamental, well, one of the core kind of tools that is really beneficial for using as a practitioner.
Yeah, I think some of the times we might underestimate just how coercive control can affect children. And some of the things that we were chatting about when we were looking at multiple pathways to harm is something fundamental, like dad having control of the money and therefore the child not having the pound that they need on superhero day at school to get a cupcake, and how that then alienates them from their peers and makes them feel uncomfortable at school. I feel like we're really, when we do the 4 days, we're really digging away at all the kind of the background of what's going on in a family. And I suppose one of the skills that we learn is about how to partner with a survivor to really get the most accurate information we can when we're writing a child's plan. We talk in the training a little bit about how we used to think about domestic abuse in the household, and how moving away from language like that is really going to empower survivors, but also keep dads, accountable for their actions, because it's not a reed diffuser. It's not like the weather. Somebody is behaving in a certain way that's affecting the family functioning. And I think as practitioners, we need to start talking in that language to really appreciate more how we can support people, because all families are completely different and will be completely differently affected. So we can't put on a child's plan anymore, little Tommy will not be affected by domestic abuse, as if it's something that, you know, he's just going to walk out into the street and be like affected by domestic abuse. We need to be specific. And I think multiple pathways to harm breaks that down, particularly for practitioners who are going back to their line manager or practitioners who are trying to explain this to somebody else. I think when we're using multiple pathways to harm, we're really being specific about how children are affected. Does that help, Lana?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I delivered one of the 4-day core trainings, I think some practitioners from children's social work were making note of how helpful this tool is for going forward to children's reporters when trying to establish grounds. You know, it's very kind of clear cut. This is the perpetrator's behaviour and this is how it's impacting on the child. Something I really like about this tool as well is that it really emphasises the importance of naming behaviour, especially when it comes to documentation. So whether that be on police concern reports or child's plans or just a social work reports, it's another means of keeping perpetrators accountable if we name those behaviours. I think we've all been guilty of writing with some form of documentation domestic abuse features within this family and has done for 10 years. What does that mean? What does that tell us? It doesn't tell us anything about the risk that the perpetrator poses or the impact that it has on the child or the family. So yes, I'm wondering, Lucy, and I think I'm not sure if folk want to start putting questions in at this point. And then at the end, we could possibly discuss some of the training that's coming up for professionals.
Thanks, Lana. Yeah, if anybody's got any questions so far, please pop them in the chat and we can go through them. But I'm wondering if one of the 4 of you would like to just maybe explain a little bit about what happens on the overview day and the core 4-day as well, and how that's maybe relevant to some professionals we've got around the table here. So we've got folk from police, we've got folk from the Crown Office, the Procurator Fiscal, educational psychologists, as well as obviously children and families. So if somebody wouldn't mind kind of explaining a little bit about that, and I can put the links to all the training we've got coming up in the chat as well.
Yeah, while people are kind of thinking about any questions they might have, I can kind of go over what we cover in the 4 days. So the first day is really looking at needs of children. You know, it's very basic, kind of breaks it back down to why we're all here, what we're really looking for. The relevance of domestic abuse within the context of how we're working. So we really delve into the fact that kind of domestic abuse is the lead cause of homelessness for women and children in Scotland. So, you know, it's covering all kind of bases. It's the reason why most children are moving from one community to another, losing all of those kind of support networks. So we're putting it in a more localized context on the first day, looking at the multiple pathways to harm and talking about how we're going to support survivors. The second day concentrates on interviewing, so it's broke up into 3 sections. Starts with how we might go about interviewing perpetrators. So again, I'm using dads because it's most likely to be dads, but not always. And people are saying that this is a place where they're not very confident, because I think historically we've had dads invisible within our care plans. We've had dads invisible when kids are on the register because they're maybe out at work or they're living in a different household. So how we interview perpetrators as parents, we're not looking for a massive confession. We're not looking for them to say, this is why I act like this. We're just looking for them to talk about how their behaviour is affecting their children. So we do interviewing dads, we then do interviewing the adult survivor, which is usually mum, but not always, and how important it is to get that right from the very beginning. So things that you'd be used to, we're non-judgmental, we're not asking her to tell her story again and again, we're going in from the stance that we believe what's happened, and we're not holding her accountable for her ex-partner's behaviour. And then we look at interviewing children. Day 3 is our documentation. So this is really where it comes to light, and we look at domestic abuse destructive documentation. So previously we might have said Jimmy has been living in a household where domestic abuse has been happening for the last 3 years. His mum has also been in previous domestic abuse relationships. Now, actually, when you think about little Jimmy, that tells us nothing. So we then look at how we can become more competent in our writing, and we look at, like Lana's just said, naming what's happened, how is that affecting family functioning? Maybe some of these things don't affect family functioning. Why is that? What else is going on for the child? What scaffolding is there round about? So day 3 is documentation and day 4 is case planning. So case planning around how we're going to move things forward, what we're looking for from a safety aspect. We try and localize this again. It's quite difficult because it is an American model, but most of us have experience of what kind of children's hearings are looking for or what our child protection system needs. So we look at case planning that's going to be helpful for you guys on the front line. So how you're going to document things that's going to make sense to other people who maybe take over the case, or what you're sharing with other professionals round about the child. And we wrap it up really by looking at things that we want to take forward and the ways that we want to change the language in Aberdeen to make sure that we're all more domestic abuse informed. Is that helpful, guys?
Thanks, Kaylee. That's been really helpful. Does somebody want to just give a kind of brief overview of the overview day? Because I think there's probably quite a lot of people here today that would benefit from attending the overview who are maybe working with some families, but maybe not in depth as maybe kind of children's services would be, who would benefit from an overview session.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about the overview day. So the overview day, it's a 1-day full day course. You start with us at 9 and you finish at about 4. And it's really, I suppose, aimed at, like Lucy said, anyone who is working with children and families. They have concerns about domestic abuse. They maybe don't know anything about the model and they want to kind of start dipping their toes into this to find out what it's all about, what are the tools, how would I apply it? And then what we sometimes get is people that have attended the overview day, then being able to justify taking 4 days out of their working week to then attend the far more thorough, in-depth training that Kaylee's just covered with us. The overview training is also really good for managers. So anyone who maybe has folk on their team that they are kind of juggling with, whether they let them go on this kind of quite intensive 4-day training. We're asking a lot of you to release people to attend like a 4-day training. So we really encourage any manager to attend the overview day as well. So you really get a flavour of what this model is all about, what it's really trying to change in how we work with every member of the family. Like we've all said already in this 1-hour briefing, the model is for every member of a family. It's not how we work with dad or how we work with mum specifically. It's really a whole family approach and just making sure that perpetrators are held accountable. So on the overview day, we actually look at, in quite a lot of detail, at this slide, which I'm going to share in the chat now. You should be able to all access that and click to open it. And that is really the bread and butter, that slide, of everything that we cover in the overview day. And we keep referring back to it in the 4-day core training as well, because those are all your bits of your recipe, if you like, your recipe for making a perfect, safe and together cake, loaf, whatever analogy you want to use. But all of those different separate little bits of the model need to be applied properly by anyone who is wanting to implement this into their practice. So for instance, it talks about things on the slide I've just popped in the chat. It talks, for example, about things like high standards / gender double standards. So there's a big old section of both the overview day and the 4-day training where we really start getting into what do we ask of a mum versus what do we really ask of a dad? And historically, how has that happened? Are we any better now? We think about, like Kaylee was saying, why it's really important that when we're working with a perpetrator, when we use this model, we really actually focus on not his partner, for his own action and how his actions are impacting his children. What does he hope for his future with his children? What are his dreams for his children's future? And how does the behaviour he is currently presenting affect that future that he wants for them? So the overview days are really, really good, like dip your toe in the model. You'll be able to start using bits from the overview day instantly in your daily practice. But for anyone who is working with domestic abuse regularly, we would always encourage that you attend the 4-day training. We appreciate that 4 days is a lot of time to take out of your working week. So we've started to deliver the 4-day training in quite a lot of different ways. We offer it either in a 1-block 4-day in 1 week. We've also done it before where we've done it on a Thursday, Friday, had the weekend break, and then done Monday, Tuesday. We've heard of other areas of Scotland doing 1 day a week. So every Monday for a month is your Safe and Together core training. So we're open and flexible to however your team would allow this to work for you. We really want this to be rolled out citywide, everyone possible to be trained on it that would be working and supporting families. So absolutely encourage you to attend at least the overview day to see really what you get from that and whether you then think the 4-day core training would be for you. Anything else to cover with that, you guys? What do you think?
Thanks, Anna. I think you've covered that really well, and thank you, Kaylee, for going over the core as well. And just to kind of, Gráinne, I know I answered you in the chat, but just to kind of come back to what you were asking about, you know, citywide training. Obviously, we're trying to do this in a multi-agency way, but there are kind of larger plans and wider plans nationally around this. So there is an action in the Equally Safe Delivery Plan, which is Scotland's strategy for tackling violence against women and girls. They have a delivery plan which has just been refreshed, and there's a specific deliverable in that about rolling out Safe and Together across Scotland. So, you know, we are kind of one of 11 local authorities that are kind of early implementation stage of this. But there are a number of other organisations across Scotland and in our city that have undergone training. So like Grampian Women's Aid have done it. Police Scotland have done training up here as well. So there are kind of wider plans nationally around making sure that everybody is kind of working to this model with a little bit of tweaking to kind of give it a bit of a local and national context for Scotland as well. Does anybody have any other questions that they want to add in the chat? Then please feel free to do so. Just to let you know, this session has been recorded, so we're more than happy to share the recording with everybody afterwards, so you've got access to that, and we'll send out just a kind of quick evaluation along with the training dates that are coming up again as well, so you've got access to them. But yeah, anybody, any other questions? Do any of you certified trainers, would you like to add anything further before we let everybody go? No. Well, thank you everybody for coming along. We hope you've found this useful. Please feel free to reach out if you do have any other questions or queries. When I email out the recording and all the information, you'll obviously have my email address, so feel free to get in touch. But otherwise, we'll hopefully see you at our upcoming trainings. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.